Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibiers. Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here. It's Wednesday, halfway through the week again. Man, these weeks are just flying by. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like the video, share it if you think somebody would be interested. And if you want notifications, hit the little bell. Music fact of the day, Paul Simon's song Kodachrome. It's really relevant today if you listen to the lyrics. It's about how Kodachrome, which was a brand of film that you used to take pictures back in the day, it's an admiration of everything that brightens the world, but it also can just show the world what we want the world to see. If you think of the line, it makes you think all the world's a sunny day. Oh, yeah. So I thought that was relevant because that's kind of what we do on social media, right? Show the world what we want the world to see. I was down in Colombia yesterday for the status conference for Alex Murdaugh, and it was weird to be back in a courtroom with him. And it was so nice to see a lot of familiar faces that we all hung out for the 6 weeks during the trial. And it was nice to see Stephen Smith's mom. She was there. I got to give her a hug. She's such a warm person. It made my day to see her. Alec was a little bit more subdued than at trial. He's always very friendly with court staff and even the officers that are escorting him back and forth. But as that hearing went on and it became clear the defense wasn't going to get a lot of what they asked for, his body language changed. He was rubbing his face a lot. He was kind of chewing on his fingernails. His face was getting red. He was a little fidgety. Judge Toal, man, I like her. She's great. She ran through a history of the trial, which began January 23rd of 2023, just almost a year coming up on it. That lasted 6 weeks. Ultimately, a guilty verdict was returned on all of those indictments. Murdaugh filed a motion to suspend his appeal, then filed that motion for a new trial. Defense attorney Jim Griffin cited the Rimmer case, which says a new trial is required when improper contacts with jurors is made. He uses the example, allegedly, some of them were told not to be fooled by Alec and to pay attention to his body language when he was on the stand. He said under Rimmer, a new trial is warranted. What happened in Rimmer? That's a 1954 Supreme Court case. They ruled that any communication with a juror during a trial is presumptively prejudicial. This entitles the defendant to a hearing to determine if the contact was prejudicial. It would also require that the state prove it didn't happen and not the defense showing it did. Judge Toal ruled against the defense and said she would not be using Rimmer as the standard. She would be using South Carolina case Green to decide who bears the burden of proof and also what needs to be proven. That was a 2020 case out of South Carolina, and the decision in that requires that prejudice must be proven and not presumed. Prosecutor Waters says the juror, who Alec's defense team has pointed out, said her decision was hers alone and not from pressure from the clerk of court or anyone else. He said this doesn't warrant a new trial. And Judge Toal made very clear this evidentiary hearing is going to be very specific to the jury tampering allegations. Judge Toal will personally question the 12 jurors. This will be done in open court. Here's the thing. Only the 12 deliberating jurors and Becky Hill will be questioned, not Egg Lady or her ex-husband, who the defense wanted to call. So only those that sat, deliberated, and rendered that verdict will be questioned. Also, Judge Newman or any attorneys in the case will not be questioned. Questions will be to the point. Essentially, did somebody talk to you? And if so, did it influence your verdict? Defense attorney Harpootlian said it's pertinent evidence as far as the statements the clerk made in the presence of the jury. The judge said she would allow Harpootlian to proffer alternates as witnesses if necessary, but only if something comes out evidence-wise in court, leading the way to do that. She says she's not going to rule in a vacuum, and as of right now, she doesn't see any cause to subpoena alternate jurors. She wants defense attorney Harpootlian to submit an outline of how he would use the alternate, what he would ask, and how is it relevant. Now, Murdaugh's team wanted to bring in other issues that the clerk is facing. He said questioning her character should be wide open, including the wiretapping, but Judge Toal shot that down. She essentially said this was not going to be a trial of Becky Hill. They'll only be allowed to bring up issues that happened while the trial was going on and not after. The defense also wanted to question SLED agents about inconsistencies in the video interviews of jurors compared to the written recaps of those interviews. Judge Toal isn't sure about the relevance or the admissibility of those SLED interviews. Judge Toal said the standard in green is to ask the juror if their verdict is still the same, and then they will ask about improper influence on the verdict, but nothing specific about their deliberations. Prosecutor Waters said the hearing shouldn't be a far-reaching mission to impeach Becky Hill. Defense attorney Harpootlian wants an impeachment of Hill, saying that just yesterday, Prosecutor Waters said a member of the court staff told her if Murdaugh were found guilty, it would be good for book sales. And that kind of circles back to what the defense claims is her motivation for the alleged jury tampering. As far as the thousands of emails that were recently released, Judge Toal said she can't see those coming in, saying this is about alleged improper contact and their verdict. She said the bulk of what defense attorney Harpootlian wants to ask just isn't proper. The judge wants the state and the defense to decide the subpoena of witnesses, really doesn't want the court to get involved. But if they get to an impasse, she would step in. Judge Toal said attorneys for the jurors would not be allowed to participate in that evidentiary hearing, but she did allow them to speak at the hearing yesterday. So up first was Eric Bland and Ronnie Richter. They represent 4 of the jurors. They said they're okay with what the judge has ruled. Their one suggestion was to change the jurors' numbers to help maintain their privacy. And the judge was open to that suggestion, but says they'd do everything possible to conceal the identities of the jurors. Up next was Joe McCullough. He represents some of the jurors as well. He says there's been negative comments about jurors he represents, and he wants the court to take notice of that and also to ask lawyers who have made comments to be cautioned. Judge Toal said she was not going to do that. He also asked that the media not be allowed to be present when the jurors are testifying, just to have the camera feed and then have the media observe from the overflow room. And Judge Toal denied that. Judge Toal thinks that she can question all 12 deliberating jurors in a day. Becky Hill's attorney, Will Lewis, also spoke and said that Becky Hill would be available. Defense attorney Harpootlian asks if they could meet with her. The attorney said that he would consider it. The judge also wants Becky Hill available as soon as that hearing begins. It's brought up again about the clerk of court allegedly making a comment that a guilty verdict would boost her book sales. The judge tells him she hopes that's going to be the last time he mentions that. She said it's not proper and it's most likely not admissible. She said Becky Hill isn't on trial and her motives aren't on trial. The only issue is improper conduct with deliberating jurors. Defense attorney Harpootlian also asked that Alec be provided case material so that he can assist them since he is a former attorney. The judge said no. It's a risk to take confidential information back into prison, making that available for anybody to see. Harpootlian said that puts them at risk of being ineffective counsel since they can't go through discovery with Alec. That was kind of it for the hearing. I mean, I thought it would last a lot longer. We were finished by lunch. So I'll be there on the 29th and the 30th and the 31st if it goes that far. I really don't think it is. But, going into it, just the conversations before the hearing started, we all thought there was a very good chance he would be granted a new trial. But by the end of this hearing, we didn't think that. We really think it's kind of a stretch to think at this point he'll be granted a new trial. We're going to move on to Rex Heuermann because there was some big news with his case yesterday. He is the suspected Long Island serial killer, and prosecutors have charged him with a 4th murder of Maureen Brianard-Barnes. He's being charged with second-degree murder in that. She disappeared in 2007 working as an escort. Her murder was linked to Rex through DNA and other evidence. He was charged through a grand jury indictment, and she's believed to be the first victim in the Gilgo 4. She was only 25 years old at the time of her murder. Rex's defense attorney entered a not guilty plea on his behalf, and prosecutors say that Rex's wife and children were not in town when the murder happened. They were also out of town when the other 3 victims, Melissa Barthélemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello, were killed. They established that his wife Asa was out of town through credit card statements that were obtained by the execution of a search warrant of a storage unit that Rex had leased. It showed his wife and kids were in Atlantic City, New Jersey from July 6, 2007 through July 20th of 2007. The prosecution says based on the foregoing, the murders of all four victims occurred at times when defendant Heuermann's wife and children were traveling out of state, which allowed defendant Heuermann unfettered time to execute his plans for each victim without any fear that his family would uncover or learn of his involvement in these crimes. The new filing also revealed that prosecutors seized 2 phones from Rex at the time he was arrested. They said the phones were used under fake names and also used for illicit activities. He utilized these phones in furtherance of hundreds of contacts with sex workers between 2020 in 2023. They also found from electronics seized from his home and office showing him looking up deceased victims and their families. The progress of the investigation, he looked for software to erase data from computers, also other electronics, as well as buying digital masking and forensic wiping tools. It says defendant devices also contained the following. And just a trigger warning here, I'm not going through all the things they found because they are just absolutely too disturbing. They found a collection of violent, bondage, and torture pornography, prostitution related searches. The filing also details the links they went through to obtain DNA, including tracking his daughter on a Long Island Railroad train. Before we get to breaking down the document, after the hearing, Maureen's daughter spoke. She said, "I was only 7 years old when my mother was murdered. Her loss drastically changed the trajectory of my life. There are countless times I needed her and she was not there. I remember she read to me every night, and now I can no longer remember the sound of her voice. I wish she were here today, but she was taken from us." Maureen's sister Melissa also spoke, saying, "Maureen was my older sister who was always there for me when I needed her. Maureen was a mother of 2 amazing children, and they will forever be without their mother." She also said, "I want to ask everyone to please remember the victims, Maureen, Megan, Melissa, and Amber. I hope everyone will also remember the other victims for whom charges have not been filed against any suspect." Let's read through some of the document. Investigators located a number of online accounts and burner cell phones linked to Rex. 2 of these phones were recovered when he was arrested, one on his person, the other found in his office in Midtown Manhattan. They did find a text exchange between Rex and someone with an online ad from March the 1st, 2020. The text from Rex said, "Hi, I saw your ad and wanted to see if we could set something up later." He ends it as Andy. The response, "I'm done for the day. Does tomorrow work?" Rex says, "I'm working all day. I was free today. My wife is out of town for the day, working Monday." She responds, "I'm available from Monday, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., Tuesday and Thursday, 10 to 7:30, and Friday 11:30 to 7:30. He responds, "Thanks, I will see which day I can make work." Then on March 4th at 7:49, he sent another text to this woman. "Andy here. Email me at sambagger303@gmail.com and we can talk bed information." They obtained records for that email account. It was created in 2017. The name he used was Andrew Roberts. The email had been used as of April 2021. The search history, very graphic. Some of the terms looked up several thousand times, by the way, included sex workers, torture, sexual abuse, autopsy photos of females, escorts in Manhattan, New York City escorts, and just a lot more I'm not going into, but they did involve underage girls, teenage girls, and things like that. Just absolutely disgusting. Let's go through some of the search history I am comfortable putting out there. He searched how cell phone tracking is increasingly being used to solve crimes. FBI Cellular Analysis Survey Team, Gilgo News, how does cell site analysis work? Historical cell site analysis, overview of principles and survey. New Discovery series tackles decade-old Long Island serial murders. Melissa Barthelomy's sister, inside the mind of a murderer. New clues in the hunt for the Long Island serial killer. Long Island serial killer victim's sister reveals more about Maureen Brianard-Barnes' mysterious disappearance. Investigators use DNA genetic genealogy to ID another victim in Gilgo Beach serial murders. He also Googled serial killers and serial killer investigations. On some of his electronic devices, he had a collection of violent pornography, torture videos before, during, and after the disappearance and murders of the 4 victims. His laptop had file shredding software shortly before he was to meet Melissa Barthelemy. Investigators believe this was used to get rid of digital evidence of the laptop computer that was being utilized to search for Melissa's prostitution advertisement. The search warrant also showed his laptop looked up Amber Costello's ad, and his burner phone communicated with Amber's phone. The phone traveled to West Amityville and Massapequa Park. This is a direct link and solidifies Rex was the man who picked up Miss Costello prior to her disappearance and murder. He was trying to wipe his computer, but did not wipe her online ad. So let's get into some of this DNA analysis that was recovered from the victims' bodies and ultimately how they tied all of this back to Rex, even though it took some time because at the time the DNA was collected, technology just wasn't there. 3 of the 4 victims were restrained by burlap and tape. Those 3 were Melissa, Megan, and Amber. The 4th victim, Maureen, who he was charged with her murder yesterday, was restrained by 3 belts. The pertinent hairs were recovered from the restraints of 3 of the 4 victims. So they had 2 outside forensic labs conducting the testing. On July 13th of last year, members of the task force met with Rex's wife and his daughter, as well as his stepson. They obtained cheek swabs with consent, and they compared those with DNA developed from 11 bottles collected from garbage cans in front of Rex's home on July 21st, 2022, and also a Monster Java can. So where does this Monster Java can come into play? Investigator had Rex's daughter under surveillance, his daughter Victoria. She was on the Long Island Railroad train at Penn Station headed to Massapequa Park. They saw his daughter drinking from the Monster Java can. I have a photo of that on the screen that was included in the report. Once the train arrived at Massapequa Park, they saw his daughter exit the train and discard the can into the trash and walk away. Undercover agents secured the can and it was transported for further analysis. What was the conclusion of that? The female DNA profile developed from the cheek swab of his daughter matched the DNA profile from the Monster Java can. His wife's cheek swab matched DNA profiles from 2 of the 11 bottles recovered from the front of the Heuermann residence. The DNA from his wife and daughter were sent to a forensic lab. DNA techniques were applied to compare to the hairs found on the victims. The female hair found on Maureen Brianard-Barnes, she had been restrained by 3 leather belts, one of which was used to tie her feet, ankles, and legs. A hair was found while examining the belt buckle. Back in 2010, they were able to determine the hair was from a Caucasian female, but it was unsuitable for DNA profiling at that time. It was sent to the lab for DNA analysis prior to Rex becoming a suspect. Recently, the lab was able to generate DNA sequencing data for the hair. They conducted a 1-to-1 autosomal nuclear DNA comparison between the female hair to Rex's wife's genotype file. The conclusion was the hair collected from Miss Barnes is 7.9 trillion times more likely to have come from a person genetically identical to Rex's wife, Asa, and her SNP genotype file than from an unrelated individual. Let's look at Megan Waterman. She had been bound by duct tape, and during the examination of her body, 2 female hairs were recovered. The hairs exhibited Caucasian or European characteristics, but unsuitable for DNA testing at that time. But recently, the lab was able to generate DNA profiles from both samples. Once tested, it was an astronomical number likely to have come from a person genetically identical to Rex's wife Asa's SMP genotype file than from an unrelated individual. That second hair It was a male hair found on Amber's body under the burlap she was wrapped in, and it was tested and found to be of a Caucasian or European characteristic. The DNA sequencing done from the pizza box and napkin that Rex discarded in Manhattan compared to the hair showed it was someone genetically identical to Rex. Also, the cheek swab that he was required to give after his arrest also matched the DNA found on that pizza box. The hair on Amber Costello, she was bound by burlap and numerous pieces of duct tape. During the examination of her body, a female hair was recovered on a piece of tape from the burlap wrapping in the vicinity of Amber's head. The hair found had Caucasian or European characteristics. Like the others, it was unsuitable for DNA testing at that time. But prior to Rex being identified as a suspect, the hair was sent to the lab for further DNA analysis. DNA from Amber's body compared to the DNA from the Monster drink can from Rex's daughter, Victoria, was more likely to come from a person genetically identical to Rex's daughter than an unrelated individual. The footnote there says at the time of Amber's disappearance and murder, Victoria was 1 month shy of her 14th birthday. Like I said, some of his Google searches included teenagers. These hairs were clearly transferred. They weren't present at the time, but it's not a coincidence. Just a little update about Bahama Mama in the hitman murder for hire case, Lindsay Shiver. She was arrested last July after texts were found in an unrelated robbery investigation where 3 people were talking about having her husband, Robert Shiver, murdered. I've never heard of this, but she was allowed to travel to the U.S. from the Bahamas for Christmas. She has to wear an ankle monitor and stay away from her husband. We talked about this in a previous episode. Her husband, Robert, is now dating Savannah Chrisley from Chrisley Knows Best. Savannah's parents are currently serving federal prison sentences. Lindsay was required to stay in the state of Alabama. She can only travel to Georgia, which is where her husband, Robert, lives, only for divorce and custody proceedings. They're still in the process of being divorced. Since she's been home, she's now claiming her husband has been keeping their 3 children away from her. So she filed a motion in the Superior Court of Thomas County, Georgia. In addition to not allowing her to see their sons, she also says he's not telling her where the boys are. Lindsay said Robert agreed to let her see the boys with supervised visitation with his parents while she was back home. She said she did get to FaceTime them on Christmas, but nothing since. Her filing says the plaintiff, Robert Shiver, has denied the defendant, Lindsay Shiver, any in-person contact with the children during the holiday season. It is believed the children have been left in the care of babysitters for extended periods during the holidays when they could have been in Alabama with their mother and extended family members who loved them. The children know the defendant is at their grandparents' home in Alabama, and the youngest is especially distraught. Now, Lindsay's going to have to return to the Bahamas for her pretrial hearing, which is on February 21st. Her trial is set for March 4th. Curious to see how that one plays out. Moving on to Richard Allen. He is the suspect in the Delphi murders of Abby Williams and Libby German in Delphi back in February of 2017. This case has ended up being a hot mess. His new attorneys have filed a motion for him to be moved to another facility. Before these new attorneys came on, because as you know, just last year and late in the year, his attorneys were removed from the case, but a motion was filed by them on November 3rd, 2022, requesting to have him moved into the Department of Corrections due to the high-profile nature of the case. Well, Richard Allen's new attorneys have filed a motion for him to be moved to another facility. He was just moved last month to a different facility. But back in November of 2022, there was a motion filed requesting to have Allen moved into the Department of Corrections due to the high-profile nature of this case. The judge granted the request without Allen being able to object to the transfer, and then the judge recused himself from the case that same day. On April 5th of last year, Allen's formal counsel filed an emergency motion to modify safekeeping, which would have likely seen him transferred to another jail. but that motion was denied on April 14th of last year. On April 28th of last year, the court received a letter from an inmate at the facility Allen was being housed at, alleging he was being abused and mistreated. On September 18th of last year, prior counsel filed a motion for a Franks hearing, and the memorandum and exhibits allege prison guards at Westville Correctional Facility were allowed to wear patches on their official uniforms supporting Odinism, and it's noted that crime scene photos suggest potential connections to Odinism, which is a Nordic religion and or cult that has been associated with white supremacy. That's what the prior defense attorneys were saying, is that Richard Allen did not do this. This was done by Odinism or Odinists, whatever you call them. In the filing in 2023, his former attorneys compare Allen's conditions to a prisoner of war at the facility he was at. His cell was too cramped. It was 6 feet by 10 feet in size. He was sleeping on a pad on a concrete floor, only allowed to shower 1 or 2 times a week, required to wear the same clothes, including underwear, for days that are soiled, stained, tattered, and torn. No opportunity for Allen to visit his wife or family members in the past 5 months. The electronic tablet he uses to call family members is monitored by prison officials, and the cost of calls are being borne by Allen and his family. Allen is afforded very little recreational time, and information Allen's attorneys provided to him to review as part of his defense on March 24th have yet to be provided to him as of April 3rd. It is difficult for his attorneys to meet with him given his segregation and isolation, which keeps him from being able to assist in his defense. In a meeting that same month as that filing by the previous attorneys, they claimed Allen seemed to be suffering from memory loss and an overall inability to communicate rationally with his attorneys and his family members. Just last month, Allen was moved from Westville Correctional Facility to Wabash Correctional Facility. His current attorneys say that the commute for them to see Allen is 233 miles from their office, and just to see him is usually a 10-hour process. On November 19th of last year, they did visit with him. They said throughout their time with Allen, he was uncomfortably and unnecessarily shackled and chained in a manner resembling Hannibal Lecter, with guards watching through glass panels and the door was open. They say Allen was intimidated by the guards and hesitant to speak freely with counsel. One of the guards had a symbolic face tattoo of Odin's spear and multiple hand and finger tattoos from Odinism and Norse mythology. They also refer to the same guard's Facebook account having things associated with Odinism on there. Allen says the guards are reluctant to provide him with shower and recreation time because it causes them extra work. Therefore, he often went without a shower or rec time just to keep the peace. His new attorneys also say prison staff indicated they did not have any type of visitation rooms for counsel to use because they were not equipped for such matters, but had fashioned a visitation room in some sort of prep kitchen within the prison housing unit. Counsel was informed the visitation would be monitored by video camera. Counsel was taken to Mr. Allen, who was locked in a prison cell located within the kitchen. The cell appeared to be designed as a place to feed a prisoner. The cell had a solid iron door with a small hinged iron flap approximately 8 inches high that opened just far enough to slide a food tray through. This iron flap was left open, and it was through this small opening that we were allowed to see Mr. Allen and speak with him. A folding table was set up approximately 6 feet from the cell door with 3 chairs on the far side of the table. We were instructed to sit in the chairs and not to approach Mr. Allen or come within 6 feet of the cell door. This arrangement made it impossible to show Mr. Allen any videos or documents or discuss the case with him without raising our voices and almost shouting. In 25 years of practicing law in 5 states, including representing numerous defendants charged with murder, I've never had to conduct an in-custody legal consultation in this fashion. The prison's visitation arrangement created an environment wherein effectively representing Mr. Allen was a fiction. Mr. Allen stated that in the 2 weeks he had been at Wabash Valley Correctional Facility, he had not received or even been offered any recreational time, and he believed he had taken 1, possibly 2 showers. He had not been allowed outside in the prison yard, although other inmates enjoyed outdoor recreation. His attorneys are requested that he be transferred to either the Allen County Jail or the Adams County Jail. They say not doing so would impact their ability to adequately represent him. The Supreme Court, by the way, is set to hear arguments Thursday regarding Richard Allen. Those include to reinstate his former public defenders, Bradley Rozzi and Andrew Baldwin, also to set a speedy trial date within 70 days of the High Court's decision, and to remove Special Judge Frances Gull and replace her with another special judge. That's the latest with Richard Allen. And you've got two sets of attorneys now claiming this stuff. It's kind of hard to think it's made up. The thing is this, he is innocent until proven guilty, as every defendant is. And it seems like this treatment is very extreme, especially if he hasn't demonstrated any tendency to be violent while in custody. This could be very bad for the whole case if this doesn't see a remedy soon, I think. I mean, you're talking about basic human rights and his constitutional rights. When you start getting into situations where he's not able to assist in his defense, these attorneys don't have easy access, they don't have private access, you're looking at a whole host of problems that could derail this even more than has been derailed. I know a lot of people out there in Twitter world and just the comments that I've received really hope that Judge Gull's removed. We'll see on Thursday. I'll keep you updated on that tomorrow. I'll be doing another episode on the Adelsons. I got Charlie's jail reports from Leon County. They are not very thick. There isn't a whole lot in there, but we will go through those. I got a few brief things from Donna Stay in Miami before she was taken up to Leon County. And I'm working to get that body cam footage of her arrest for my YouTube channel. Still have to go through the proper channels to get that. So I'm hoping to get that soon. I'm going to clean up that video a bit, add some subtitles, sharpen the picture, put that up as soon as I get it. Hope you guys have a good rest of your evening. We will see you soon.